Okay. Today I'm going to be telling you about a man who was paid in lavish and expensive robes. He was a very interesting artist. He was called the greatest draughtsman in England. He loved animals. He fought in World War I, claiming to hide under a pile of bodies in no man's land, and was accused of worshipping a Chinese serpent goddess. This is the story of the father of automatic drawings, Mr. Austin Osmo Spare. When I originally was researching this video and making it, I was looking into a lot of stuff about automatic drawings because I was just scrolling through Wikipedia one day and I thought it was really cool. And then I found him because it said father of automatic drawings, and I went to his Wikipedia page and a bunch of articles about him. And oh my goodness, is he just so much more interesting. Interesting in a lot of ways. He kind of sucks, and but he's kind of cool at the same time. For instance, so I don't keep going back and forth, I'm just going to show you some art on screen now. There's a bit of it. I can't show you a lot of it because a lot of it is naked people. Like, if he had a book of all of his art and it was 100 pages, 95 of those pages would be naked people. But nevertheless, let's get into it. Mr. Spare was born in 1886 in London, and his parents were both super conservative. His dad was a police officer, and his mom was a daughter of a Royal Marine, so very my way the highway. Just as he loves kids, not loves kids, he says he loves animals when he was a kid, and that continued throughout his whole life. That later he joined the Royal Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, RSPCA. So he was real cool. Christian upbringing and nothing really out of the whack. When he was 14, that's when everything changed. It said that he was seduced by a elderly woman who was the descendant of a Salem witch. And not like the usual seduced, oh, want to have a good time sort of thing. No, it's like I have knowledge and powers that you don't know about, and they're cool, and I'm offering you my hidden knowledge and powers. And he was like, I'm all for this. So when he was 14, it said in 1900 he left for the Lambeth School of Art, where he was taught by a guy called Philip Connard. Here's Philip Connard. There's some of his art. A lot different. Just a lot different from Spare's, but still. After school, Spare would go and get jobs. He had a job designing posters and doing glassworking. And in the evening, he would come back to the school, and he would visit two people, Sir William Blake Richmond and F.H. Richmond, who recommended him for scholarships to the Royal College of Art. And Spare's art later was also exhibited at the St. Louis Art Exposition, where he got a silver medal, and the judges praised his work, saying, and I quote, "a remarkable sense of color and great vigor of conception." So he's getting jobs, he's getting an education, he has a lot of friends in the field that he's going into. Everything's going pretty good for him. Later, Mr. Sperry Boy, he leaves Lambeth and he joins the Royal College of Art and he begins studying there. Teaching is different. It says that he didn't like his tutors, like the way that they taught, so that they disciplined him, whatever that means. And then it says in a lot of the articles that he wore flamboyant garb and became popular. So typical art student stuff, I suppose. But this is when it starts getting weird. It says he started getting into the Western esotericism here, and reading a bunch of philosophy and grimoires of occultists, and then he started practicing the occult in his free time. He had so much free time that he wrote his own grimoire. I don't know anyone who's ever written a grimoire. I read that and I was like, all right, I guess I don't know if that's like a first step in the door to being a wizard or whatever, but it's just interesting. I think I can find the grimoire. If I can, it's on screen. But let's keep going. Later, he went on to another art exposition where they called him a genius and the greatest draughtsman in England and an artistic prodigy. And so he kept doing pretty good in this early stages of life. He kept getting a lot of awards, and he kept getting people that were looking at his art and thinking, "This is new. This is cool. This is weird." That changes very quickly to a certain point. In his early 20s, he started doing illustrations on books commissioned to him, and then he did political cartoons, and then another book. His second book after the Grimoire was his book of satyrs, which had self-portraits, satirical images, and a lot of naked people. I'm pretty sure the self-portrait that you saw there is from that book. There was also bric-a-brac in there. Bric-a-brac is a form of art. I'm going to show it on screen. That it just gives me anxiety. Look at that. I cannot stand that. That just is terrible. Okay. But in 1907, he held his first major art exposition called Black and White Drawings by Austin O. Spare, and it got the attention of the press for just being horrifying. An observer said that Mr. Spare's art is abnormal, unhealthy, wildly fantastic, and unintelligible, which is 3 insults for one, I guess, compliment. I read that as your art sucks and it creeps me out, but at least it's original. So I guess he had that going for him. And then a lot of articles say that the art was observed by his close friends and that they said it was good, which is like a dude trust me bro source. But nevertheless, we get to the fun part now where he starts getting more into the occult. His art catches the attention of Aleister Crowley, who's super famous. You can look him up. Might do a video on him later too. But Aleister Crowley gets in contact with him and he wants to pay him to do art for his books. And so you're like, okay, cool. He's getting more money now and he's having more patrons. No, wrong. Because Crowley doesn't pay him with money. He pays him with lavish and expensive ritual robes. All right, man. And then, like, legitimately, like, after, like, only a few times of him, like, making art and commissioning for him, he would get invited to Crowley's ceremonies and the cult meetings. And it says that Spare disliked the way Crowley ran everything because it was very, like, hierarchical. And he just didn't like it. There's also rumors that Crowley made advancements towards Spare. I can't find much more than just it saying advancements. Then they both, like, talk bad at each other. It says Crowley claimed Spare only was interested in black magic, and that's why he didn't want him there. And Spare was saying that he just didn't like Crowley. Later on, it says Spare moved, and he found a wealthy property owner who introduced him into popular homosexual circles, who later became his patrons and started supporting a lot of his work. And then it says that a lot of his friends swore he was gay because of this, to which Spare defended himself, saying, "I'm not gay. I've had sexual encounters with an intersex person, a dwarf with a large forehead, and a Welsh maid," which, that's an interesting rebuttal. But we'll keep going. Later, he met a middle-aged woman who fell in love with his art, and then she showed him her daughter. And later, those two got married at St. George, Hanover Square. And it says that Spare choked on his wedding cake. I don't know why it's in this article, but it is, so I'm including it. So he moved to several different areas, and he tried befriending local Jews. It says he was reading the Zohar and Song of Solomon to impress them. Later, Spare's wife strained him. Spare said she was unintellectual and materialistic, and she disliked his relationship with younger males, asking him to cease association with them immediately. There's two things weird about that like phrasing of this point in his life. One, it's like, it's kind of weird. I was just going like out of his way to like call his wife a stupid idiot when she's expressing discomfort with him being like friends with a lot of younger dudes, because it's like, she's like, you just kind of flamboyant, things are kind of saucy, it would make me more comfortable if you weren't. And he just goes, "You're stupid, you're materialistic, I hate you." And then it's weird how it just like randomly mentions like that he started befriending like local Jews and like started reading stuff to impress them, because it's like there's no relevance to this later. Like he doesn't get into like he doesn't like become like a Zionist. He doesn't like get into like super Judean occultism. Like it's just there. But then after this, Spare drew self-portraits of horned animals and hermaphroditic creatures next to him, talking about our mental connection between our non-human ancestors, which is where you see a lot of the art come from. Like, you can definitely see a correlation between, like, the stuff that's on screen now to his first book, The Book of Satyrs, which is, like, there. And, again, this is kind of what I'm thinking at the beginning, that this sort of relates to, like, how much he just liked animals as a kid. Because, no, we don't have horned ancestors. No. Yeah. And then he did illustrating for his third tome, The Book of Pleasure, The Psychology of Ecstasy, where we finally get to see his connection between the unconscious mind and automatic drawings. It was self-published and poorly rated, and not many reviews said anything good about it, if any of them did. One of the things, though, about automatic drawings, because that was the cool thing, I'll put it on screen here. Wow. One, they look weird, they look funky, but they look kind of cool. Two, it's letting your unconscious mind do the work. So, like, if you think about any stroke, any movement, any up, down, anything, like, you biffed it. It biffed. It's all about, like, letting your body just do whatever it wants, which is, like, weird compulsionary. It's like, when do you stop, you know? But nevertheless, you get stuff like that. Later in 1914, he met another one of his old friends at an art exposition and convinced him to make an art magazine with him. The first few publications, they discussed automatic drawings and the mind's ability to produce art unconsciously. It was described as a very horrible publication and out of touch. The magazine lasted 2 issues, and Carter would leave from arguments with Spare. So he met an old friend, made a magazine with him. They had 2 publications, and poorly rated, and they started blaming each other, and the house fell down. So that's quite fun. In 1917, Spare joined the Royal Army Medical Corps. He was forced to, and he was stationed in Blackpool in the middle of World War I, where Spare would give tetanus vaccines to troops. Spare was reprimanded for scruffiness and complained his pay was being taken for a sports fund. It's like, bro, there is a war going on. Everyone's money is going to the war. He did get moved to Waterloo, where he was an acting staff sergeant, and later he would say he served in Egypt and studied hieroglyphics, and he fought on the Western Front, claiming to, and I quote, hide under a pile of corpses in no man's land to survive. There's no record of that. There's no record of him going to Egypt. There's no record of him studying hieroglyphics. There's no record of him being there on hiding under corpses in the Western Front. There's no record of any of that. Just kind of valor stealing at this point. He began working on his 4th book after he came back to Britain because his wife left him. And the 4th book is called The Focus of Life. It was, again, more like occult, weird BS stuff with a bunch of weird ideals that don't correlate with history or humans, and mostly just about, like, horned hermaphroditic animals and creatures. And it was really off-putting. It was edited by a bunch of people to make it more acceptable and less, like, grotesque to, like, people, so that they would want to read it more. Spare then after this made another magazine publication called The Golden Hind that wasn't well received because it sucked, just like the last magazine. It lasted 8 issues this time, so 6 more than the last one. And he moved to South London, to a crappy neighborhood where he called the experience a swine with swine. I think that's in the article because it's supposed to be like, I'm pretty sure what he was trying to say is like pearls before swine, but he just said swine with swine. Just calling himself a pig. But later it says he got into radio and made a sketchbook of automatic drawings he called The Book of Ugly Ecstasy, and it just looks like schizophrenic ramblings and like just like hallucinatory episodes, just like on paper. It looks cool, but it doesn't look conscious, which I guess is the point of it. The book was simply described as grotesque. There was only 1 copy, and it was collected by an art collector. Spare wrote 2 more books after this. One was The Valley of Fear, and another was The Anthem of Zos, the Sermon of the Hypocrites. The first book was just more distasteful drawings, and the second book was a criticism on British society based on the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche, who I would love to make more videos about, but there's already a million videos about Nietzsche, so you can look those up. 2. After this, the second book he made 100 copies of at his sister's house, and also he made 6 giant paintings of decapitated women at his sister's house and just kind of left them there. Like, I get he's an artist and like that's his thing, but I wouldn't like go to my brother's house and be like, hey, mind if I leave this here? And they're just like TVs with like live leak videos like playing. Like, bro, don't leave gore at your family's house. Later his father died, and a lot of his popular patrons did, so he wasn't getting nearly as much support. He was poor and living in Britain, so all of this together, he naturally contemplated suicide, but then he didn't. He drew anthropomorphic women from the influence of El Greco. Here's El Greco. Here's El Greco's art. I love El Greco, but that's maybe my inner Christian coming out. How do you get anthropomorphic women from that? How do you get influence to draw anthropomorphic women from that? He's just an interesting guy in the way that he thinks about things, the way that he's original, but it's not like it just feels like it's grasping at straws for a lot of his ideas in art. And it's just weird. I couldn't find any of his art from these pieces, though, from the influence of El Greco. I wish I did, honestly. But it says after this, he just moved 3 more times, did nothing. But in the summer of 1936, Surrealist art became all the rage, and Spare had a chance. A reporter found him, and he wrote a piece called The Father of Surrealism, He's a Cockney, which is hilarious how back in the day, like, people would, like and dislike each other based off of small distinct nationalities. It's like an Irish person and a Scot would hate each other. It's like, bro, you live 10 miles away. What the hell? But later he would capitalize on the surrealist thing coming to the rage, and he would sell divination cards at exhibitions and surrealist cards too. Then he began teaching at his studio, and he called it Austin Spare's School of Draughtsmanship. Spare would later claim that the Mustache Man bought his art. He didn't. He also said that the Mustache Man bought a portrait of him, but Spare responded by saying, "If you are Superman, then let me be forever an animal." What does that even mean? Spare told this story multiple times and changed it every time. Again, just a dude, trust me, bro. He just loves lying about war. He just loves trying to make himself seem more interesting. And then it says he went to Berlin with the artwork that he made for him, and then returned and made it into anti-Nazi artwork, which, again, no record of any of this. He's just saying it. Once World War II broke out, Spare tried to enlist, but he was rejected and deemed too old, which, thank goodness, because he would have made up stories about storming the beaches of Omaha and single-handedly killing 80 men and saving thousands. God save the Queen. But after this, his flat, his studio, and everything was destroyed during the German bombings over London. He was homeless and his arms were biffed. And if ever a sign to quit and stop art, I think having both your arms be biffed is one of them. He stayed at a sculptor's studio, and he slept on 2 chairs and fed a bunch of stray cats. And you can say a lot of things about him, but animal abuser is not one of them. And we're almost done. He had a few more successful art exhibitions in 1947, where he was successful, and he met a man named Kenneth Grant. Kenneth was a former disciple of Aleister Crowley, but they hit it off, and they became good friends from their mutual interest in the occult, and Spare wrote more works, which Grant helped with, and the books did better. Spare got into witchcraft and art more, and he was starting to get his groove back. Like, he was starting to get more into it. Then the one guy who was helping him and supporting him throughout all of him get back on his feet accused him of worshiping a Chinese serpent goddess, which I couldn't find. So here's a picture of Nu Wa from Smite. Spare then had a few more art shows and even went to pubs with tribal art and pastels, which he was fond of. They were successful and he was just coasting by, and then he was asked to do an exhibit for his art at a few more shows, and one called The White Bear, and it was called a commercial failure. Then he got an interview with the BBC in 1955, and he was ridiculed the whole time. He died the following year, and I forget what it is. I'm probably going to add this in later. But he gave away his stuff in two things. He gave Grant like the first choosing of like the first 4 picture like paintings he had and like 100 manuscripts, and the other friend he got him like, you can have like 6 of my books, and then the decapitated women paintings, which is like what a garage sale of things to like leave at the end of your life. But just an interesting life, how there's never like a moment of solidarity for like more than a year. Like it went from like weird occult to art to praisal to more praisal to leaving to getting ridiculed, getting called grotesque, to to lying about war several times. There's just so many weird connections and like things that he does and make, and then like I'm literally like in a jumble up here. What a interesting man. But that was the video. That's him. I'm probably gonna make more stuff like this in the future. But yeah, hope you enjoyed. I will see y'all on the next one. Peace.